Để dậy.
Gì? Là sao?
Không nhắm mắt được không?
Nhưng mà sợ chói mắt con á.
Không, để dậy.
Ok. Vậy con cứ mở mắt nha. Nào con thấy cái nào con thấy thoải mái thì được. Con học lớp 9 hay lớp 10?
Lớp 8.
Lớp 8 à. Cố gắng mụn con nó nhiều, nó dày dữ lắm luôn rồi. Con làm là nó hư da con hết. Cứng lắm nè. Chịu khó xíu nha. Thở lỏng. Ừ. Ừ. Cố lên, cố lên. Ta lắm. Cố lên nha. Đừng nhúc nhích đi con nằm yên nha. Con nhúc nhích cho cô bị lỡ cái kia, cô bị lỡ tay á. Con nằm yên cô nha, cô đổi chỗ lên đây. Nằm yên. Cố lên.
Không có yêu gái nữa.
Ừ?
Không có yêu gái nữa gì.
Ừ, còn mấy cái nữa thôi. 2 phút nữa. 2 phút nè. Nhiều lắm con ạ. Về nhớ rửa mặt làm sạch da kỹ nha. Cỡ 1 phút nữa thôi. Đang tí nè. Rồi, cho nghỉ tí. Nằm yên đừng rút tay, để tay cho cô.
but it stung no one seemed to care about my kids or how Sarah's demands would have turned their lives upside down. All they cared about was her version of events where E was the heartless villain refusing to help. Thankfully, I had my own circle of support. My close friends and a few relatives knew the truth and backed them up without hesitation. "You did the right thing," one of my friends told me. "Anyone who tries to push your kids out of their home doesn't deserve to be part of your life." Still, the fallout was exhausting. Canceling the wedding was a logistical nightmare. I had to contact vendors, explain the situation without airing too much dirty laundry, and navigate the awkwardness of calling off an event that people had already marked on their calendars. Most people were understanding, but a few tried to pry for more details. I kept my responses vague, saying it was a mutual decision and that we'd realized we weren't on the same page about the future. Through it all, my kids didn't know the full extent of what was happening, but they could tell something had changed. My oldest asked me one night, "Are we not having a stepmom anymore?" I smiled gently and shook my head. "No, we're not. But you know what? That's okay. We're still a family, and nothing is going to change." That they seemed relieved, which only reinforced that I'd made the right decision. The thought of them being shipped off to some boarding school while Jake moved into their rooms still made my blood boil. Sarah had completely underestimated how much I valued my role as a dad, and that was her biggest mistake. The final straw came a week later when Sarah showed up unannounced to grab more off her things. She walked into the house like she still had some claim to it, her eyes scanning the place as if she were checking for signs of her absence. She didn't say much at first, just packed her stuff in silence while I stayed in the kitchen giving her space. But as she was leaving, she stopped in the doorway and turned to me. "You know," she said, her voice icy, "you'll regret this. You had a chance to build something better and you threw it away." I met her gaze, calm but firm. "No, Sarah, I didn't throw anything away. I protected what mattered most, my kids in their home. If you can't understand that, then this was never going to work." Her expression flickered for a moment like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, she scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and walked out the door. For the last time, the house feels quieter. Now, honestly, this wasn't the future I'd pictured when I proposed to Sarah, but maybe that's for the best. My kids are safe. Their home is still their sanctuary, and I'm free from the chaos she tried sobering into our lives. But I can't help wondering, was there something I missed early at night when they were asleep? And honestly, it was one of the few parts of the house that felt like ours. I told her weren't changing if she didn't argue outright, but I could see the irritation in her face. She made a passive-aggressive comment about how we'd Havito figure out how to make space for everyone eventually, and I let it drop. Around this time, Jake started showing up in more of her conversations. He was apparently staying with her parents, but according to Sarah, it was a temporary thing. She mentioned him needing support and how it was hard for her to see him struggle. I didn't really respond to that because I didn't know what to say. Jake wasn't my responsibility, and I was already juggling enough. Then came the day she asked if Jake could come over for dinner. She said he wanted to get to know me and the kids better since we were all going to be family soon. I agreed, to be honest. I was curious about him. The dinner was awkward. Jake showed up late, reeking of bad decisions, and spent most of the night complaining about how hard life was for him. He barely acknowledged the kids who had been excited to meet him and only really spoke to Sarah. I tried to make small talk, but it felt like pulling teeth. After he left, Sarah gushed about how great it was that we'd all gotten together. I didn't know what dinner she'd been at, but it wasn't the one I just endured. I told her Jake seemed like he was going through a lot, and she immediately got defensive, saying he just needed a chance to turn things around. I let it drop again, but something about the way she jumped to his defense didn't sit right with me. A couple of weeks later, Sarah started mentioning Jake more frequently. She said her parents were pressuring her to help him out, and how she felt torn between her family and her future with me. I could tell she was fishing for something, but I wasn't a budo bite. That's when the requests started getting bolder. She floated the idea of Jake staying with us for a little while after the wedding. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that, but she wouldn't let it go. She said it would just be temporary and that he'd stay out of the way. I asked where he'd stay, and she casually suggested the spare room. I reminded her that it was the kids' space, and she brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. The conversation didn't go anywhere, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. Around this time, I also noticed a change in how Sarah interacted with the kids. She started asking them questions about school and their routine, which seemed harmless at first, but then she started making these weird comments about how they'd benefit from structure or how they might enjoy a new environment. One day my son asked me what a boarding school was. I froze. I asked him where he'd heard about that, and he said Sarah mentioned it. That was a moment where the alarm bells in my head went off full blast when I brought it up to Sarah. She laughed it off and said she was just talking about how boarding schools have great programs for kids. She said it was an innocent conversation. Booty wasn't so sure. I told her I didn't want her planting ideas like that into her heads, and she got defensive, saying she was just trying to help. At this point, the cracks in our relationship were starting to feel impossible. Tonya or Sarah's focus seemed less on building a life with us and more on bending our life to fit her vision. I was starting to feel like I wasn't just blending a family, I was